Hi, everybody. It's your friend Rogan, as always. I am experiencing a Tuesday morning here. Um, yeah, kind of sucks. Hopefully, it's an evening or late at night where you are, and a more congenial day of the week. Pretty much any day of the week. I think Tuesdays generally are the worst in my experience. So I am reverting in my movie watching and reviewing projects to silent movies. Um, is another list I've been working on all along, sorta. Anyway, um, I assume most of you have never seen any silent movie. Uh, Movies were silent until 1927 or so. Um, the feature-length motion picture, formally, in terms of style, also and technique, other technical matters, the movie that you would recognize as a movie, that's sort of from 1920 forward, basically. Now, of course, silent movies were silent. And one thing about most silent movies is there isn't really a definitive soundtrack. You can play your own music or actually watch them silently. I tend to do one of those two things. I am so musically minded that I have to watch silent movies in silence to pay attention to them right, at least the first time, because the music, I'll just pay attention to the music and let the imagery just wash past. Um, might not be the only one who has that issue. So if you're gonna take a look at the silent cinema, you're gonna watch Central Classics, the great movies. You, the first movie you want to start with, and the metrics for my little lists on IMDb says the same thing as I would personally. There's a movie called Metropolis. Uh, Metropolis is German, Weimar. It's now, for one thing, during this period in the 1920s, mid 1920s, the best movies in the world are coming out of Germany. There's just the German cinema is head and shoulders above everything else, the way that for most of our lives, the American cinema has been ahead of everyone else in the world. Uh, the movies that are just good on all fronts in every way are German. There's interesting filmmakers here and interesting movies here and there all over the world. Off the top of my head, most of the really good American stuff that we still watch now, it's Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. It's comedy. The German stuff across all genres. If you were to look it up, you were to look it up in a textbook, you would find the phrase German expressionism come up a lot in terms of how style is described during this era. Here's the deal with that. All the German cinema is described as German expressionism, and that's some bullshit film critic sling. And what it means is that during this period, German filmmakers were stylish, kind of trippy. Design was interesting. Uh, that's really all it means. German expressionism just is all the German cinema that's interesting, in horror movies and fantasy movies, a lot of it. Now, most of those filmmakers had to flee the war and the Nazis, and came to America and went to work in the movie industry, directors, actors, other technicians. Uh, the directors and the designers, production designers, tended to make low budget crime movies. And so the upshot of that is the guys who invented what they called German expressionism are a lot of them the exact same guys who later invented what they later decided to call film noir. That's also some bullshit film critic slang. Good excuse for programming festivals. So, Metropolis. Metropolis is a dystopian science fiction epic produced on a gigantic scale, um, totally engaging as storytelling to this day. There's no overstating how much fun Metropolis is and how cool it is. Uh, um, I I tend to watch it with There's several different edits of this floating around. There's a completely uncut version now online, finally restored from a print found in Venezuela that we are supposed to believe did not belong to some Nazi who escaped justice at the end of the war. There is a provenance online. Yeah, they got a story. But it turned up, right about when a Nazi would have died of very old age. And well, you can look it up. You can decide for yourself. I don't believe the bullshit they sling about where they got this print. The upper level Nazis really loved Metropolis. Thea von Harbo, who wrote it, her husband Fritz Lang directed it. Now, they're sketchy characters. There's interesting history there. She was beloved of the Nazis, one of their leading filmmakers. He fled, left his wife behind. Now, his first wife, they murdered her. I mean, fact check me. Look this up. It's interesting, but it really, history has recorded, and generally it's believed, that Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbo murdered his wife in a bathtub and covered it up with the help of their own social status. Then the story later about Fritz Lang and the Nazis, you get different stories depending on your source. Again, so fact check me, and you will get different stories depending on your source. But the story that I generally accept and goes around is that Thea von Harbo, his wife, like I said, the Nazis loved her. They wanted an official filmmaker and were about to invite director Fritz Lang to do that, or they did invite him to do that, and he said thanks and said he'd come into the office and talk to them about it, and then immediately fled the country because there were Jews in his family among his cousins, and he was afraid he was going to end up bringing hell down on himself and them if he got involved in the inner circles of the Nazi Party. Now, I recommend not giving a fuck about that in terms of watching Metropolis or any other Fritz Lang movie that Thea von Harbo wrote. Look, for one thing, she's a truly great screenwriter. If you care about gender, that is to say, if it matters to you that women were a lot of the great screenwriters in the beginning for a number of reasons in a number of countries, you got to see her as central. And that means you got to ignore her association with the Nazis. Now, here's how cinema history tends to do that. They pretend it doesn't matter and it doesn't exist. Like, if you look into what film nerds online generally have to say about Metropolis, they just avoid Thea von Harbo, and they avoid talking about Fritz Lang's early work as a body of work that is just truncated by the war and the Nazis coming into existence. I don't think we need to do that. I think we can basically separate the art from the artist, especially with movies. Movies are made by a collective. They're made by a team of people. It would be, frankly, rude to all of them, the actors, the designers, the rest of the crew, to tag everyone with the bad character and ideology of the writer and director. Now, you might be thinking it's a dystopian science fiction epic, and a prominent Nazi wrote it, therefore it must be poisoned by ideology. How could it not be? It isn't. There's not a hint or trace of racism or what's the word I'm looking for? Fascist totalitarianism, or an urge toward violence as social mechanism. None of that is in this movie, Metropolis. I've seen it more than a dozen times since I first saw it when I was 13 or 14 years old. I've even played music live for a screening of a print of it. It was fun. Now, there are movies and movies made by some of these prominent Germans from this period that I do think are ruined by racism. This is not one of them. And that's true of other Thea von Harbo, Fritz Lang collaborations also. And I think you got to take that on a case by case basis. Look, don't go looking to get offended. Watch a movie. Is it offensive? Does it offend you? Just like a person. Just, let it prove itself or disprove itself, as the case may be, um, on its own terms for you. Um, don't go making decisions about the politics of a movie, because the text itself, yeah, has politics. The cast and crew, I don't think you should hold the movie to account for them unless they specifically really, really want you to for some reason. The movie will beat you over the head with its waywardness and backwardness if it has those problems. We'll revisit the subject later when we get to Leni Riefenstahl, because I really love Leni Riefenstahl movies. So, yeah, there's that. Theo von Harbo and Fritz Lang, murderous Nazis, made this movie. I think that's maybe a point of interest rather than a reason not to watch it, but it really isn't relevant, and mostly people pretend it's not relevant at all, and it doesn't come up when the movie's discussed. Another thing I recommend, I mean, there really isn't any way to overstate it. Metropolis is purely entertaining. If you've never seen a silent movie, start here. If for some reason you think somehow this is some stuffy, arty ass bullshit that I'm trying to lead you down a garden path of boringness to pretend to like we're going to college here just to watch a movie, please disabuse yourself of that notion. This is a great movie by any terms. And if I recommend classic movies to you here, it's going to be because they're just as good as a new movie. It's not going to be for any other reason than it is as entertaining as a movie can be. And this is very much true of Metropolis. As far as the music and the soundtrack goes, with Metropolis, for sure, I would recommend picking your own music, playing DJ while you watch it, because there's a lot of latter day and modern music that works for it. Pretty much anything dark and heavy. I mean, I've found that like 80s, 90s industrial music works really well. Nine Inch Nails, The Birthday Party works really well. Einstürzen and Neubauten, that kind of thing. Wax Tracks, anything on the Wax Tracks label from those years. Now, that frame of musical reference gives away my age. Because that stuff was popular when I was young and eating lots of acid. And therefore impressionable. Most of you will be younger than me and therefore have different music to bring to Metropolis. But I suggest you do. And like I said, play DJ or take turns playing DJ while you watch the movie. Lots of music goes well with Metropolis. Is that it? I think that's it. Now, 13 minutes? Yeah. Which is appropriate because the movie starts at 13 o'clock. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening, kids. I will come back to recommending prominent, important silent movies as I find them. Now that I'm trying to go from best downwards and sort of outwards from the center and starting with Metropolis, I might find movies quicker. I've watched a lot of silent movies trying to find stuff to recommend to you, and they're old as shit. So like there are very few that I can actually recommend to a general audience like Metropolis. But Metropolis, I certainly can. You should go out and see it if you've never seen it. And thank me later. You might actually thank me for Metropolis.